Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Cooper Marcus with us. Cooper, thank you so much for coming on the program.
My pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Cooper, you were the co-founder of Wishery, and you currently do business development for platform at New Relic. Now, I want to have you back on in the future to talk about New Relic because New Relic is loved by the startup community, by developers, and I know you guys have some really cool things coming out that you can't quite talk about yet, but that are going to be really interesting to our audience. So I'm going to have you back on for that.
Great.
But right now, I want to talk about Wishery because you have an amazing amount of knowledge about business-to-business marketplaces, and we've never really had anybody on the show to really do a deep dive into that. So I know you have a slide deck here, so we're going to work through this slide deck and kind of just have a dialogue talking about what you've learned about business-to-business marketplaces and how awesome you think they are, and all the little tips and tricks about how to get users, get profits, and all those kind of things. But to start out, Cooper, tell us, what was Wishery?
So Wishery was essentially a CRM for small and medium businesses that brought together everything that a business already knew about its customers right into the email communication flow. So a plugin for Gmail, at least it started out as that, that would automatically pull in information from your email marketing, your e-commerce, your Google Calendar, Google Docs, and show it to you right there in Gmail, so you had some context about who you were emailing with in a business. A little bit like Rapportive for business. Rapportive is a great sort of social plugin for Gmail. We're kind of the business plugin for Gmail.
Okay, great. Makes a lot of sense. Now, tell us about the growth of Wishery. Tell us about kind of how big it got. Anything you can disclose, so that people have an idea of the size it got to.
Sure. So Wishery was co-founded by me and a technical co-founder, and we didn't have a lot of resources for buying growth, so we had to hack it. And we did so by focusing exclusively on B2B app marketplaces as our distribution channel, and it proved to be very effective. At our peak, we were signing up over 100 new businesses a week with essentially zero acquisition costs. We weren't paying for the traffic, we weren't paying for the signups. They were just showing up through these B2B app marketplaces. We also had some exceptional conversion to paid rates. Well over 20% of our active users upgraded to our paid product. And for a freemium B2B product, that was a pretty good conversion rate.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now, to start out, kind of tell us, what is a business-to-business marketplace as opposed to just some other kind of app marketplace? Because I think if people don't make that distinction early on, this is going to be a hard talk to follow.
That's right. So you could think of a B2B app marketplace as a business-focused or exclusively business version of the Apple iTunes Store or the Google Play marketplace. Now, in iTunes Store and Google Play, you can certainly find B2B apps, but there's also a lot of purely consumer apps. In B2B app marketplaces, there are no consumer apps. They are only for business applications. And they're typically hosted by a vendor of a business software, business application. Yeah. So MailChimp has an integration directory. Google Apps has a Google Apps marketplace. Salesforce has an app exchange. They all have different names, but they essentially do the same thing. They allow the users of a business app to easily find and discover and acquire other applications that are pre-integrated or work well alongside the app of the host company. They're just for business buyers, they're just for business applications. So if you have a piece of business software or you have buyers of your software that are app businesses, they are a vital channel for you to consider.
Yeah, so the orientation of this this slide deck, is really not so much worried about consumers. It's not really worried about mobile apps per se. They might be mobile, but that's not really the focus. It's not really worried about number of downloads, that kind of thing. It's different than just the normal things you talk about when you talk about the iOS App Store. So what is this? What is this talk really for? Who's it for?
This talk is really for the publisher of a piece of business software, typically SaaS, typically freemium, that wants to explore a new kind of discovery and distribution channel that is fairly underutilized. Getting your app well ranked and making a good business of it in the Apple iOS App Store is tough, right? What are we at? 500,000 apps in the Apple iOS App Store. There's plenty of B2B app marketplaces that have less than 100 apps in them. I mean, think about the difference, right? How are you going to rank well when there's 100? Hey, it's totally doable. We did it. You can do it too. When there's 500,000, it's a whole different story.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is for business application publishers who want to look at this channel. And to be fair, this channel is not your only channel. Folks will still come to your website. You still need to have other ways of people discovering and acquiring your software. But it can be very effective and extremely efficient once you get good at it. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today is how to get good at it.
So in case people are kind of on the fence about really investing in these B2B marketplaces, Wishery was eventually sold. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
So there's light at the end of this tunnel.
Absolutely, there is, and I feel like there's even more sort of opportunity in the future because of essentially the training that the consumer app marketplaces are giving everybody. Everybody is becoming used to buying applications through app marketplaces, but this is kind of a new behavior for business buyers. It's important to be right there as this behavior changes, and you can be.
Edge of that.
That's right.
Yeah, that's great. So tell us about the terminology a little bit. You use the words publisher and ISV. What is a publisher and what's an ISV?
In this case, let's say a publisher is a company that is hosting a marketplace. We might also call them a host. They typically have an application like MailChimp or Google Apps or Shopify, but they also want to provide a place where ISVs, publishers of applications, can list an integrated offering on that marketplace. So let's call the other party then the ISV. That's you, the audience of this talk. You publish a piece of software and you want to distribute it through a B2B app marketplace. That marketplace is hosted by a publisher. You're the ISV, and then of course there's also the end user or the consumer, the person that uses your app and the app of the publisher.
Yeah, and then you give some examples here. You've already mentioned a few of these. We have the Shopify App Store here.
Yep.
And then below that you show the Google Apps Marketplace. Another popular one, MailChimp, a company a lot of people that watch this use for their email campaigns and things like that. They have their own marketplace, B2B, like we've been talking about. So kind of tell us why. Why should we be focused on these B2B marketplaces? We know that it worked out for you, but get into it a little deeper now.
Sure, certainly. Well, first of all, the publishers are doing a lot of work to drive traffic to these marketplaces. They're saying if you use MailChimp, you should shop for things that work with MailChimp in our store. You need to be where the buyers are shopping. These marketplaces can be great for SEO. The benefits of being well ranked in a marketplace extend well outside of the marketplace. Google indexes basically all of these marketplaces. So a well-ranked, well-trafficked listing will translate. People that buy through marketplaces tend to have a higher tendency to upgrade to a paid version of your product. There's something about the psychology of shopping in a marketplace compared to just shopping on the web that produces higher conversion. In some cases, the marketplace host, the publisher, will actually do co-marketing with you, blogging and tweeting and other things that will bring more visibility. Also, the marketplace host may give you money. Wishery got money.
Literally
yes,
money.
That's right. MailChimp wrote Wishery a check very early in our history. It was instrumental in getting our company off the ground. That came out of the MailChimp integration fund. More and more marketplaces have these funds. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, app marketplaces are the future. Everybody is going to be buying basically all of their software from app marketplaces in the future, and you need to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you give some great slides here next. It shows you at the top of the Google Apps Marketplace, which is impressive, but then on the next slide, it shows you, taking 1, 2, 3 of the top spots on the actual google.com search for Wishery. And so there's really a translation here between maybe ranking high in the App Store of Google and ranking high in Google itself. Is that right?
That's right, and you could see these 1, 2, 3 listings in the Google search result are from 3 really different properties. The first one is Wishery's own website, but the second one is the Google Apps Marketplace. That's a google.com domain, and the third one is the MailChimp integration directory, a MailChimp.com domain. So you basically get to kind of spread out your web property across lots of areas. that are well trafficked and thus result in higher rankings in Google and other search engines.
And you mentioned that one of the benefits already is that you get a higher conversion rate of the free to the pro. But here you actually show us the graphs. Talk to us about these graphs, these bar charts, real quick.
So this was a fascinating piece of research that was presented at Google I/O a couple years ago, where one of the more successful apps in their marketplace showed that the conversion from free to paid was much higher when a given user arrived through the Google Apps Marketplace than when they arrived through the ISV's own website. So think about that. The users using the same product, you would imagine that no matter how they get that product, they'll have the same tendency to upgrade to paid. But this data was quite clearly showing that is not the case. A user that arrives through a marketplace will have a much higher tendency to upgrade to a paid product. And I believe this actually holds true well outside of this single example.
Yeah, and then you mentioned how you get marketing from these people that you integrate with. And here's an example of the MailChimp blog blogging about Wishery. You have a tweet from MailChimp being sent out about Wishery. How much does that help you guys getting a blog post like that and getting a tweet like that?
It was huge. I mean, it was absolutely vital. It produced big traffic spikes, which tended to convert well, right? This wasn't just the kind of Hacker News traffic or the Slashdot effect where people show up and leave. These people actually found our product, acquired it, started using it, and later bought it because of this extra coverage that we got from, in this case, MailChimp. This coverage would not have been available if we were not in the MailChimp integration directory. They reserve coverage like this for the companies that integrate with their product. So the price of entry to this kind of coverage is the integration that you're potentially going to build between your product and one of these marketplaces.
Now on this next slide, you mentioned that you can actually get real money, that people will pay for you to develop things in their marketplace. And I think you said the MailChimp fund was really instrumental to you guys early on. And here's some examples from MailChimp. Has a $1 million integration fund, the Shopify fund, the Big Commerce fund. So it's not just, it happened to be MailChimp, you guys happen to get lucky. Like, these things are happening on an ongoing basis, at different cycles in these companies.
Absolutely, and I believe they actually happen even more than we know. There's some that are not announced. If you have a great idea and you need a little extra funding to get over the hump with a particular marketplace, ask them, right? Just reach out and ask.
Yeah.
These things are happening even when we don't hear about them, when they're not publicized. In not all cases will it actually be them writing you a check. It may be an advance on your payments. It may be a commitment to co-marketing ad buys. But regardless, these are companies that want more integrations in their marketplaces, and in some cases, they are willing to pay for that. You could be the recipient of those dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this next slide, explain this to me a little bit. You have the Google Play Store up here. You have some other stores. You have the iOS store on the phone. What are you communicating with this slide?
So what I'm trying to say here is that these are the biggest companies in tech. Microsoft, Google, Apple. They're training every single one of their users to acquire applications through app marketplaces. They're doing the training. They're doing the expensive and difficult task of changing behavior. You, as a small app publisher, have a huge opportunity here, which is to capitalize on this behavior change that's occurring. Everybody buys apps through these consumer app marketplaces. Not everybody yet buys them through business app marketplaces. But to the extent that people, this becomes the new norm, the B2B app marketplaces will also become the new norm. It's thus important that you be where people are shopping. And thanks, big tech companies, for training our users on this nice new efficient way of reaching them. Because frankly, reaching people through B2B app marketplaces, I believe in some ways is easier than cutting through the noise on the internet in general.
Yeah, it seems like it is. And so now we're really going to get into how, because there's so many questions. You've laid out a great framework. You've told us why it matters, why we should care. But now the how is where the rubber hits the road and we really get, to see how it's done. I'm going to run through kind of the steps, and then I'm going to have you walk us through each one. First is a scan. Second is a deep dive. Third is an engage. 4, prioritize. 5, build. 6, test and tune. 7, launch. 8, reviews and ranking. 9 invest, and then 10 and 11 are profits, right? So that's
right.
kind of the 11 things we're going to work through here. But let's start with the first one, scan. Well, what do you mean scan? Where does this whole thing begin?
So there's a lot of marketplaces, and there's more all the time. I'm going to provide a resource link on this page where you can find a list I put together a while back of something like 150 different companies that either have marketplaces or are likely to have them in the future. You'll find even more. What you're doing in this step is you're kind of quickly building up a target list. All right, I think maybe these 10 or 20 are the ones that are at the top of my priority list. Getting into an app marketplace does require effort on your end, and you want to make sure that your effort to reward ratio is the best. So this first step is do a quick review and figure out which ones, where is it going to be lowest effort for you to get into, the best audience appeal, which means that your product, your software is most appealing to the audience that's already in the marketplace and also has a good addressable market size. Google Apps Marketplace and MailChimp Integration Directory have some pretty huge market sizes. There's other marketplaces with much smaller ones. However, raw marketplace sizes are not what you need to consider. It's the addressable size. Mm-hmm. So for instance, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're thinking about the MailChimp Integration Directory, but your app is only useful to owners of pet stores. Well, okay, your addressable market size isn't the entire audience at MailChimp. It's the audience that has pet stores. Maybe there's also a SaaS application that is a accounting software only for pet stores. They might have 100th the audience of MailChimp, but the addressable audience is 100%, right? Every single person who has that product could also have your product. So think about the addressable market size for each of these marketplaces. Basically, in this step, you're building a quick ranking that we're then going to refine in subsequent steps.
Yeah, now let me ask you kind of a side question here. You know, if I go to, let's say, the MailChimp marketplace, does what I do have to be something about email? Does it have to have a really close correlation? Or do they let things in that are maybe interesting to their audience, even if it's not related to email? What's been your experience with that?
You know, it varies on the marketplace, and we'll certainly get into a place here where you're going to do a review of those particular details. Mm-hmm. In most marketplaces, there is some requirement that it be somehow related. Mm-hmm. But say when it comes to Google Apps Marketplace, well, Google Apps Marketplace is pretty much for any B2B piece of software. The relationship required in Google Apps is more of a technical one around single sign-on. In MailChimp Marketplace, it kind of probably should have something vaguely to do with email or with marketing. But you know, they vary. These marketplaces vary, and you can always ask. We'll see in a later step, you're going to make contact with the host of the marketplace, and you can check with them. Hey, this is what I'm thinking about. You know, are you going to let me into the marketplace? Mm-hmm. Am I going to get a warm reception? Just ask if you have some doubt.
No, that is great advice. So after you scan, the next thing is to really do a deep dive. So what do you do during this deep dive stage?
Okay, so in the first step, we reduced our list of 150 or 200 potential marketplaces, maybe down to 5 or 10. Now, in this step, for those 5 or 10, you're going to do a deep dive from the customer perspective. So that's the end user of the publisher's product, which is also the potential end user of your product. And also, you're going to do a deep dive from your perspective as a potential participant in this marketplace. So from the customer perspective, you actually want to walk in their shoes. Go to the website, go to the MailChimp website, click sign up, create a new test account, walk through it and watch carefully. Is the marketplace promoted? Is there mention of integrations? Are new customers to this company that you're thinking about integrating with, are they going to be alerted to the fact that there is a marketplace and your product is there? Mm-hmm. And then once you become a test customer, watch their email communications. In their newsletter, do they mention it? In their getting started sort of nurturing emails, do they say, hey, also check out our marketplace? If they don't, then your addressable audience at that particular marketplace may be smaller than you expected, because there's a lot of people using that product, but they might not know that a marketplace exists. Companies vary widely at the level they promote the marketplaces to their own user base. And then there's also the ISV perspective. So what's it going to be like to build and integrate and publish your listing? How is the support? Is there an active mailing list, or are you just out of luck if you have a technical question? And review the terms and conditions. there may be a legal reason that you cannot get in there, right? This goes back to can you publish something that is unrelated? Mm-hmm. It may say right in the terms and conditions, no. Mm-hmm. So this is the point where you're kind of looking to eliminate some of your top 10 list and get it down perhaps to a top 3.
Yeah, and then you have some slides here that really show us how prominent things are featured in the different B2B app stores. So you see in Shopify here, it's actually built into the login. So during the login process, you're actually seeing featured apps. So that might sway your opinion about, okay, do I want to put resources into getting into Shopify or something else where I'm not displayed as prominently? Is that right?
That's right. And you can see in the next example with Constant Contact that at the time I took this slide, Constant Contact was doing very little to promote their app marketplace to their users, at least compared to Shopify, which was doing a ton. Now, these things change over time, and these slides are from a little while ago. This does not mean that for you, Shopify is a better marketplace than Constant Contact. You need to do your own analysis and look at the factors and how they're going to affect your app within this context, within these particular marketplaces. But this is the kind of thing you're going to see as you walk in the shoes of a potential customer of Shopify or Constant Contact or any other place that you're thinking about becoming an ISV and listing in their marketplace.
Yeah, so you've done the scan, now you've done the deep dive, now it's really time to engage with these marketplaces. So talk to us about that a little bit.
So before you start coding a thing, before you make any kind of plans, maybe do some quick sketches, lay out in a paragraph or two what you're going to do and how it's going to work and why it's interesting. Get in touch with the host, right? Pretty much every company has somebody, or maybe even a whole department in some cases, dedicated to making these app marketplaces a success. Find out who those folks are and reach out to them directly. Look, you're a growth hacker. I don't need to teach you how to find and reach out to people. So find the right people, reach out to them, and say, look, I'm thinking about coming in. This is what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think? And if you get a positive feedback, then check on, okay, great, I think I'm going to do it. Can I get a blog post? Can I get tweets? What other co-marketing opportunities are available? And do you have any sort of funding program? As I mentioned earlier, even if it's not public, they may still be able to write you a check or make a financial commitment to you to get this integration out there. It doesn't hurt to ask, and this is a great time to ask about it.
Yeah, and depending on how the engagement goes, you start to prioritize. You start to kind of, rank order the list to decide where you're going to really spend your limited resources. Talk to us about prioritizing a little bit.
So these previous steps, 1, 2, and 3, and in step 1, you really kind of built up a big list. In step 2 and 3, you were winnowing them down. Hopefully you've been keeping track of all of this on a Google spreadsheet, and now you click the sort button, right? You've given some sort of score to each one of these marketplaces. You've totaled up the score for each marketplace, and now you look. What's your data telling you? Okay, I need to start with this one. This particular one seems to have the highest opportunity. Do a quick gut check. Is my math right? Is this making sense? Is this really where I want to start? Probably you do, but there may be some confounding factor that suggests you actually start with your number 2. For the most part, you want to do this in sequential order, particularly with the first one. Working with these app marketplaces is new and different. You want to get familiar with it. There's a lot you could do wrong, so don't screw up 2 at once. Start with 1. But you may have the resources to go on some sort of parallel track, to go into 2 or 3 marketplaces simultaneously. I generally don't recommend it, but I mention it there because some companies will be big enough that they can do that.
Yeah, so after prioritize, that's when you really jump into the building stage, which is interesting because, just because you're doing something B2B doesn't mean you can skip customer development. And that's really what you've told us already. It doesn't mean you can skip over really figuring out, doing your homework, and deciding how you should spend your effort when you start to engineer something. And so you've done a lot of work, and you're just now getting to the build phase, which I think is an important point to note.
And this is, to be clear here, this is about building the integration. I'm making some assumption here that your product, your core offering, is either done or well underway. The integrations themselves tend to have a little bit of engineering effort, sometimes a lot. That engineering effort may or may not be reusable across marketplaces. This is really about building a minimum viable integration. This slide should probably say that, right? The minimum viable integration that isn't lame. You don't want to do something that's just totally lame because it's going to bite you in later stages. Now, if you're new to building integrations between your app and these marketplaces, the first time around is going to be tougher. There's going to be some new stuff for you, particularly around things like authentication, OAuth. Some of these are tricky to learn, but once you've learned them, you will find that many of the techniques will carry over, if not your actual integration code. That may end up being a bit different per marketplace, but the general techniques and the general approaches they use can end up being pretty similar.
Yeah, and so now you've built the integration, you built the minimal viable integration. How do you test it and tune it? What's the process look like there?
Well, so it varies a lot per marketplace. Some of them are very helpful in providing kind of a process and framework for doing a closed beta where you can invite just a few people to try out your integration without publicizing it. Others, this doesn't exist. It's either nobody tries it or it's public. Most marketplaces, you're going to need to have some sort of reset button, which is going to be something you're going to build. What a marketplace generally provides is a sort of technical framework for a new user to become a user of your product, and typically to do some sort of single sign-on or some sort of integration of data. For you to really test this well, you're going to need to pretend to be a new user coming from that marketplace and signing up for your product the first time. You're going to have to walk in their shoes again and again and again, which means you need an easy way to go back to new user state. You're going to build this reset button, and the first thing you're going to do before each test run, each hands-on test run, is click the reset button, and so that you can walk through.
Yeah. And
now,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
And at this point, just to be clear, because you're new, you want to, for the most part, you want to minimize your requests of the host, the publisher here. Don't be a burden on them. There's generally a lot of documentation. There's generally a lot of past discussions you can look through. Really try to help yourself at this point. It's going to be valuable later on that you weren't annoying, asking dumb questions early on. You'll see later why that's so important.
Yeah. So now it's kind of the moment we've been building up to. It's time to launch it. So what does launch look like?
So launch in this context looks a lot different than the launch you might be expecting. Really, you need to do it quietly. Oh, and first, many of these marketplaces will have a review. So at some point, you're going to click a button that says, I'm ready to list. They will then look at various aspects of your integration. The review varies dramatically. At Salesforce App Exchange, the review is extensive. At other marketplaces, it's very cursory. But you always have to pass some sort of a review. The trick with this launch, though, is to do it quietly. Do not tweet, do not post, do not share with the world, do not deploy your range of growth hacker techniques at this point. It's a little too early. Because, remember, you're new to app marketplaces, you're working with new integration technologies, you've done some good testing and you think the new user flow is solid, but it probably won't be. You probably forgot something. Somebody's going to come up with something that's going to break your integration. You don't want to have a big flood of new users here because it will make it much more difficult for you to fix the problems that they might be encountering. This is also a great time to be communicating individually, one-on-one, with every single person that signs up through your marketplace listing. See how their experience was, fix any problems they have. Really, this is the time where you're providing incredible support, fixing issues quickly, maximizing your focus on this phase. This phase is why I suggested earlier that you may not want to parallel track, because you cannot launch in multiple marketplaces simultaneously and give the level of kind of quality attention that's needed to ensure success in the marketplaces.
Yeah.
You really want to make sure you have good reviews right at this point, because they're important later, but also they're important with your relationship with the publisher. The host of the marketplace wants to see apps in their marketplace that the end users love. And if you come right out of the gate with a bunch of bad reviews, you've pissed off the host, right? They're not going to be happy with you. They're not going to give you the co-marketing support you want later on. That's why this is the number one most important step in this whole 11-step process.
Wow, so it's really the one. Communicate personally with the new signups and get great reviews and that whole thing and fix the issues quickly. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so now you mentioned just a second ago the reviews and the rankings and how important those are. Walk us through that a little bit more. We know reviews and ranking are important in a lot of other ways, but it doesn't seem like they'd be as important with B2B marketplaces.
You bet they are. They're vital. I mean, they serve the same function in B2B app marketplaces that they do in consumer marketplaces, which is that they allow an end user to get a sense, is this thing any good? And particularly to get a more trusted sense, right? When an end user gets or sees a 5-star review from a fellow MailChimp user that this MailChimp add-on is great, they're going to trust that a little bit more than when they see something from who knows who saying it's great, right? There's kind of a higher level of trust there. These reviews are really important. They help with your rankings. They help with discovery in the app marketplaces. The ranking and review kind of algorithms really vary from marketplace to marketplace. But the short answer is you need great reviews and a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And the best way to get that is to ask. So every single one of your users, ask them at the right time. Don't ask them right after they've had a bad experience. Don't ask them right after they've discovered a bug. Ask them when you think they're primed to give you a good review. And also specifically ask them not to give you a bad review. Email them, IM them, however you get in touch with them, and say, look, if you're having a great experience, please let the world know. Click this link, fill out the review. If you're not having a great experience, get in touch with me personally. Here's my cell phone number. Call me and tell me what I can do better. But whatever you do, don't leave a bad review. Mm-hmm. You should ask specifically for the behavior you want from your end user. Now, as you're getting these reviews, you need to kind of measure and monitor. And in most marketplaces, they give you very little in the way of analytics support. There's very little in the way of alerting or notifications. You're going to need to set up your own notifications. And I think this changedetection.com service is really one of the best. It just watches the web page and tells you when it changes, so you'll get an alert every time somebody posts a review. And in some cases, you have the opportunity to respond to reviews or reach out to users. And if somebody does leave you a bad review, you're going to work hard starting right then to turn that around and get them to change their review from a bad one to a good one.
Yeah. And then you also talk about experimenting to improve the rankings. How do you experiment? It doesn't seem like there's much experimentation to do.
It's tricky. So experimenting in these app marketplaces, there's a lot to learn. App marketplaces do vary in the way that they do ranking. Are you on the home page? Are you listed in the rank for a category? Where are you? Monitoring that and experimenting to improve that is important. You getting good reviews generally helps a lot. Getting lots of installs typically helps. Making sure you keep your installs. Some marketplaces track the people that uninstall your product after they install it, so it's only net installs, not gross installs. There's also some clever things you can do with app marketplace optimization, AMO, let's call it, and I'll show you one of those in a second here.
Yeah, you have a couple of slides here that are really great. One, it shows on the Google homepage. This isn't the Google App Marketplace. We're on Google.com again. You do a search that brings up Wishery, and below the link is actually how many good reviews you have. You have 56 reviews, and it looks like a 5-star rating. So they're actually putting that data inside of Google proper.
That's right. And you don't know when this will happen, right? You can't tell in advance when your reviews will kind of travel along with your integration to other places on the web. Mm-hmm. Because you don't know, makes it even more important that you have great reviews.
That's right.
Because you can't tell where they're going to appear. And you can be sure that if they're great, they'll be very helpful. And if they're bad, they will be hugely damaging.
Yeah. And then you've actually taken the reviews from the Google App Marketplace and you've actually put them back into the Wishery website. Is that right? You actually integrated their good reviews back so people can have that social proof.
That's right. I mean, reviews are terrific content marketing. You can retweet them, you put them in your website, you can put them, blog about a user that left a good review, interview them, and post that back to your blog. They are terrific pieces of content marketing. They're from the mouths of users. They're authentic. Even though you've asked for a good review, you didn't write the review for them, and these users won't give you good reviews unless they're having good experiences. So these things are very valuable pieces of kind of content marketing that you can repurpose all over the place, including right on the homepage of your own website.
So you also mentioned something kind of interesting, which is keyword stuffing in the reviews and in the description of the product. Now, I'm used to the SEO world, the normal SEO world, which, keyword stuffing was something we did in the late 90s, which, Google's kind of banned and they penalize you for it. But the B2B marketplaces, it's a very different animal, isn't it? So talk to us about keyword stuffing.
So I put this in here because it is such a sort of a no-no in normal search engine optimization. But app marketplace optimization is different. Don't bring your preconceived notions about how to do SEO to AMO, bring a fresh and think about things that maybe you weren't allowed to do. Well, here you can do, and this tends to work great. I see it done rarely. It was very effective for Wishery, and it could work out well for you too. So let me explain what's going on here. What you're looking at is Wishery's listing in the Google Apps Marketplace. You'll note at the top in the features section, we did some things with kind of trying to call out keywords and key phrases that customers are likely to search for. So maybe they're going to search for spreadsheets, or maybe they're going to search for, or maybe they're going to search for unsubscribe. We've got those things right there in the top in the features section. But also, maybe they're going to search for Aweber or Evernote or Vertical Response or Campaign Monitor, various applications that they use, and they're looking, hey, I'm on Google Apps Marketplace, I've got Google Apps, I've also got Aweber, what can I get? So they just type Aweber into the search box. Mm-hmm. Well, in many cases, the only result that would show up would be Wishery, because we were the only listing in an entire marketplace of 400 or 500 integrations at that time that mentioned Aweber. Now, to be clear, we mentioned Aweber in the section that said coming soon, integration with Aweber. So we weren't deceiving anyone. Wishery at this time was not compatible with Aweber. Nevertheless, if somebody has Aweber and somebody has Google Apps Marketplace and they do the search, they're going to find Wishery, and maybe we're still useful to them. This isn't deceptive, because we're not saying we're compatible when we're not. This is just about discovery. Hey, you might like Wishery, because if you have Aweber, maybe you also have Shopify, and yes, we are compatible with Shopify.
Yeah.
So this was useful in terms of letting us show up in search rankings for a lot of keywords. And you can do this on some marketplaces, perhaps not on others. Depends on your product, right? Not all products can have a big old coming soon section. And now that we've shown this technique, it may sort of quickly decrease in its viability. But hey, give it a shot, right? Remember in an earlier step we said experiment? Experiment with it, see what it produces. Because particularly in the Google Apps Marketplace, as we go to the next slide, we'll see the other thing it produces, which is some valuable market research. Now, the Google Apps Marketplace is different from some other marketplaces, but not all, in that it incorporated a Google Analytics tag. This meant that you could see search traffic on the Google Apps Marketplace that resulted in your listing, that landed on your listing, as if it was on your own website. Some other marketplaces also have analytics integration, and they let us see something like this. So let me explain what we're seeing in this list. We see here that the number 1 and number 2 search terms for finding our listing in the marketplace were Wishery and CRM. Okay, great. We're Wishery, we are CRM. But number 3 and number 4 were Salesforce and Evernote. So that meant that a lot of the people that were showing up on Wishery's listing in this marketplace were searching for something that worked with Salesforce or something that worked with Evernote. This is incredibly valuable market research, because now, as an app developer, I might consider prioritizing a Salesforce or Evernote integration above some other integration that is appearing way down this search results list. This kind of data is just absolute gold, and it can be difficult to get if the marketplaces that you're working with have this analytics data available, or even make it available through some sort of clever experimenting. Then it's really worth considering. And I call out here, is this keyword stuffing or is this market research? The answer is yes, but it's fine either way, and it's a valuable growth hacking technique.
No, that's a great insight, and I'm sure that is applicable to so many other things that are not B2B marketplaces. If people just get a little bit creative, they could also outsource their to-do list of where their market is. So I think there's some insights there beyond what we're saying, but that's awesome what you are saying. Now the 9th thing here is to invest. So what kinds of things are we investing here?
So to be clear, we're investing in the success in a particular marketplace. So you thought about all the marketplaces, you ranked them, prioritized them, you built your integration, you launched it quietly, made sure it was working extremely well, made sure you've got a good process for getting lots of good reviews. All right, now double down. This is the time when you can potentially ask the marketplace host, the publisher, hey, will you feature me? Every marketplace has a homepage, and the featured listing on those homepage is almost always at least partially editorial. That means somebody's deciding which apps go on the homepage and which apps don't. Through the previous sort of process here, you built a great relationship with the person that decides. Now's the time to ask them, hey, we've done a great job. People love our integration. How about putting us on the homepage? In some cases, you could spend money. I believe the Salesforce App Exchange allows you to buy better placement. Most other marketplaces don't, but you can ask. Even if they don't specifically allow it, you might ask them, hey, if you won't put me on the homepage because I'm asking nicely, how about I pay you? Now, of course, you want to be careful with making sure you get a good return on your investment, just like with any kind of advertising. And you may find advertising helpful. Wishery did some experimenting with Google keyword advertising. In some cases, it was quite effective. Low volume, but high return on investment. So you can experiment with that as well. And to be clear, we're advertising to get traffic to the app marketplace listing. So this is unusual, right? You're not trying to get people to come to your website. You're trying to get people to go to somebody else's website where your product is promoted within that website. It can make the tracking a little bit difficult, but it can be really good.
Yeah.
And then we get into kind of typical content marketing, blog posting, videos, case studies, webinars. Typically, the publishers, the app marketplace hosts, they love to promote this stuff, right? Guest blog for them. Let them guest blog for you. Talk about how to use the products together. These things have to be educational. They have to be useful. These are not advertisements. These are content marketing. You're a growth hacker, so you're already good at content marketing. And in some cases, you can outsource the production, right? If you're writing blog posts about how to be great at email marketing, well, there's a lot of people that will write those blog posts for you. You don't necessarily have to do them yourself. And then finally, you may discover that you need to add more features. Many marketplaces have a lot of integration hooks, a lot of richness to their APIs. Remember early on, we built a minimum viable integration. Minimum, right? It's just the minimum to get into the marketplace. Maybe you realize, if I added one or two more features to my integration, I'm going to get a lot more traffic, a lot more conversions to paid. This would be the point that you go from minimum to built out integration.
Yeah. And so now we get to the fun part. Number 10 is profit, and number 11 is more profit. And then you kind of have this like rinse and repeat mentality after that. Talk us through where we go after the profit, aspect.
So where you go after the profit aspect is basically back to step one or maybe step two, right? We started with a giant list of marketplaces. We winnowed it down to a few. We built on one. We became successful on one. Great. You've learned a lot. You can do it next time faster. You'll be smarter about which features to include, which integration points to use. It's just going to be plain better. Take all you've learned, take the playbook you've developed, and go back and repeat. Repeat the same playbook on each app marketplace. Remember, there is a huge diversity of marketplaces. You're going to need to be in a lot of them. Right? There's companies, a few, that have built big successful businesses in a single marketplace, except those are all consumer marketplaces. They became big on the Apple iOS store, and that's it. Right? There is no single app marketplace that's big enough for you to rely on exclusively. Maybe Salesforce App Exchange and Google Apps Marketplace are getting close to that. But I'm in touch with some of the people that have number one rankings on the Salesforce App Exchange. And I know that they also have to consider other channels for acquiring users. So when you approach this technique, as I said right in the beginning, this is a tactic. This is not the thing that you bet the whole farm on. This is a thing that you have in your quiver. It can be very effective. It's very efficient. It's undercapitalized. But what you've just learned is how to do it well. So keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. What percentage would you say of your effort with Wishery went into this kind of system you've laid out for us? Are we talking this is 20% of your effort, 80% of your effort? Give us an idea of how big the piece of pie that this consumed was.
Well, for Wishery, we had a product that was only worked in the context of integrations. So there was no Wishery standalone product. There's other business. Most B2B apps can work by themselves without being integrated. Now, because it was dependent on integrations, we were also essentially dependent on B2B app marketplaces. Most of our users, most of our signups never came to our website. They found us and started using us through these app marketplaces, just like most users of iOS apps never go to the website of the publisher. They just find them and acquire the app on the iOS marketplace. So for Wishery, the marketplaces themselves were hugely important and a major channel for us. In terms of level of effort, this was my main job, was working with marketplaces to optimize our distribution. My technical co-founder's main job was to build our product and build the integrations.
Yeah.
But there is, especially if you're parallel tracking, a fair amount of work involved with getting good at working with these marketplaces. Though I got to say, this do it all again, faster, smarter, better, it really works. Mm-hmm. Each time you do this, it's going to get perhaps twice as easy. You can imagine, right? The fourth time you do it, it's trivial, right? You're cranking these out. So it doesn't mean it's a lot of effort always. There's also the kind of the customer support, customer service, the review management aspect of this. The reviews are so critical that sometimes you're communicating one-on-one with individual customers, changing their experience from bad to good so that you can change their review from bad to good. That can be time consuming, but it's typically worth the effort. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of thing you're going to learn to get faster and better at, and your product is going to get better over time to make all of that work well.
Yeah, talk to us about the timeline a little bit, just so people have realistic expectations. Now, obviously, every app is different, every integration is going to be different, but I mean, your first integration with Wishery, are we talking 3 months, 10 months? I mean, what are we looking at here?
No, I mean, if you really want to compress this process, and if you're doing truly a minimum viable integration, in some of these marketplaces, you could potentially go from 0 to starting to see users from the marketplace, I don't know, a couple weeks, maybe less. Yeah. Other marketplaces, depending on the technical effort and what you design for your integration, may take a bit longer. But you can, in some cases, crank them out very quickly. I did find, I just have a vague notion, though, that well-integrated apps and marketplaces that offer a more integrated experience tend to produce more value. The closer you get to a marketplace just being a listing, right, just a directory with no integrations, it's just a list of URLs. The closer you get to a marketplace being a list of URLs, the less value there is for the end user, right? Well, they could just be Googling. I mean, they could just find a list of a whole bunch of apps, right? When there's no integration, when there's no functional benefit to finding your product and getting it through a marketplace, then I find that less people do it, right? There's just, why would I bother? Some marketplaces present a lot of great advantages to the end users to go through those marketplaces. Those marketplaces tend to be the ones that are a bit more difficult to integrate with, but they're better. They're better for the users, and they'll be better for you. So don't expect to kind of shortcut the effort to reward here. If marketplace is incredibly easy to get into, you may find it doesn't perform as well than one that actually takes a bit more effort.
Yeah, that's good advice. Now, you have a few resources here. I think you have 3 of them. List off some of the resources that you think are helpful for people kind of going through this process.
Great. So we're going to have some links here. There's some great success tips around Google Apps Marketplace, but they're really applicable to all B2B app marketplaces. Frankly, I think this topic is fairly undercovered on the internet. There's not a lot of good resources out there for learning how to succeed in these marketplaces, but this posting on this blog that I'll provide here was very helpful. There were also some good sessions at the Google I/O 2011 conference about succeeding in B2B app marketplaces. And then finally, I'm going to give you a list of at least 150 companies that have B2B apps that either have or are going to have app marketplaces. Remember back in step 1 when we said start winnowing your list of potential integration targets, potential marketplaces? This is a great list to start with. But I built this list a while back, and I welcome viewers to let me know about the ones I missed. I'll add them to the list. This is a Google spreadsheet, so I'll keep editing it as I get information and try to make it better and better, at least as a starting point for the giant list of app marketplaces that you could potentially integrate with.
Yeah. Well, Cooper, this has been an incredible interview. I hope people realize just how much information you've actually given them that's actionable, because none of this was theory. This was things that you actually did that actually worked, and it's stuff, like you said, that's not being talked about. So I really hope that when people have an app that falls in the category that could benefit from B2B marketplaces, that they'll just put this talk on replay and listen to it over and over and over. Again, Cooper, thank you so much for coming on Growth Hacker TV.
My pleasure, Brian. It's been a lot of fun.